Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and welcome back to Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies for another 25 horror movies you can currently watch on Netflix. So, in my previous video, I listed 25 horror movies on Netflix that are not particularly scary, but are really fun to watch. They're good recommendations. There's a link to that video in the description, but in this one, these are 25 scary ones, and I have them ranked sort of as to how scary they are and also just how good they are. So, the closer we get to the top of the list, the scarier they get and the better they get. In addition to these 25 movies, later on in the episode, I'm going to tell you how our sponsor, CyberGhost VPN, can help you access even more movies with your current Netflix subscription. So all the way back at number 25, I've got a really good little indie flick called The Monster. Now this is a small movie in the sense that it's just about a mother and her daughter trapped in a car in the middle of the woods and something is lurking outside. Like a lot of good classic horror movies, this one relies very heavily on not showing you the creature for the bulk of the movie. It's dark, it's rainy, they can barely see what's going on, but the movie does establish early on there's definitely something. It's all the way back at 25 because this one's only going to scare you so much. It does have the jump scares. It is a frightening situation if you really put yourself there, but like any horror movie, if you try not to get scared, odds are you're not going to. But if you watch this one on a dark night, particularly a stormy one, this one could get you pretty good. At number 24, I've got one that really surprised me, and that's Friend Request. Now, I was even naysaying this one before it came out. I had no interest in seeing it and watched it on a whim on Netflix, and I was pleasantly surprised. Now, it is what I expected. It is a formulaic horror movie, but it's a little grittier than I expected it to be. It's got an R rating, and it's got a harder edge than I thought it was going to have. Now, part of the reason I liked it is because I could not have had lower expectations for it, but it had some decent special effects. I don't think it overused CGI. In fact, it used it pretty smartly at times, and the premise is silly. It's basically about someone haunting you through Facebook, but it did work way better than I thought it would. Obviously, there's a massive suspension of disbelief, but I just told you about a movie about a monster, and half of these on the list or more require that suspension of disbelief. So if you go into this one with the right mindset, which is going to be low expectations, suspension of disbelief, and just kind of wanting to have fun with it, and maybe even wanting to kind of get scared by it, this is a good Halloween watch. Headcount just recently got added to Netflix, and I was excited for this one. It's a new release. It just came out this year, and it's already on the platform, and unfortunately, there's a reason for it. Now, this one does have a lot of promise that it ultimately didn't quite live up to, and it's also very, very slow, but the concept for this one's really great. This is about a group of college kids out in Joshua Tree. They're just partying, having fun during like some sort of break, and strange things start to happen. There might be someone lurking around, then they start to suspect there's maybe an extra person hiding among them. That sounds weird. It works. There's a couple of really good gotcha moments, and I don't mean jump scares. I mean like really clever moments in this one, and ultimately it builds up to this climax that I thought was good. I thought it delivered on the concept, and the concept is something very different from anything I'd seen before, so it got big points for that, and then it sort of just loses points for just sort of meandering along and sort of like taking its time a little bit too much. But again, that tends to happen with really low budget horror. Now, one of the best looking movies on this list is The Lodgers. Another one that's fairly slow, but this is a beautiful movie. It's very gothic, it's spooky, it's got all sorts of like supernatural visuals. This one is not foreign language or anything, but you could watch this one on mute and it would just be like a beautiful movie to watch, making it a really great watch for Halloween. But it's creepy, it's dark, it really kind of goes there. If you think about movies like The Woman in Black, I find this to be superior, but sort of in a similar sort of Edgar Allan Poe gothic kind of way. If you're into that at all, this is a must watch. Before getting to the top 20 on this list, Stephanie is another one that really surprised me. I've talked about this one on the channel a few times before, but it's about a little girl who is completely alone. You're not sure what happened. Seems to be some sort of a Bird Box-ish type of scenario, and that's not a spoiler. It's not like a you have to be blindfolded kind of thing, but there's some sort of apocalyptic event that has left this girl on her own, which is a really terrifying prospect to begin with. And then, when it gets dark, strange things start to happen. And that's really what makes this one really scary, is you're put in this position where you're observing this little girl who's scared and she's alone, and then there's like something horrible after her, possibly. And then this one just kind of keeps going and developing, and I was really surprised where it ended up. Obviously, I'm not going to give you any spoilers here, but this is a really good hidden gem that I think far too few people have watched. I would definitely add it to your list for Halloween this year if you have not seen it. Another really great gem is Hush. Now, to me, this one's really great for fans of the slasher genre because it does a lot of things that slasher movies do with a major twist. The primary victim in this movie is deaf. She cannot hear her attacker, and that makes for some really interesting scenarios. So again, you're put in this position that's familiar. It's kind of like a Halloween, Michael Myers type of a situation, yet your protagonist cannot hear anything. You can, but the filmmaker, who, by the way, is the same filmmaker who did The Haunting of Hill House last year that everybody loved. This movie was done prior, and he just did the new Dr. Sleep movie, the follow-up to The Shining. So he's a really great filmmaker, and the way he, as the director, handled this twist in this movie, I think was really brilliant. My number 19 pick is Await Further Instructions. This takes place in the UK, and this one to me feels like an old episode of The Twilight Zone or something, but way more graphic than they used to get away with on The Twilight Zone. But you've got this family gathering during the holidays, and all of a sudden, there comes a message on the screen that says await further instructions. The windows and doors are all covered up with some odd material. Moments of this one in the beginning kind of reminded me of Wreck or Quarantine, the American remake of Wreck. And then it goes in a completely different direction. But this is a great one that kind of keeps you guessing. Now, this is a very anxiety-inducing one, not just because it's claustrophobic, but because these people are locked in together, and the beginning of the movie establishes that this family does not really get along. There's a lot of tension without this scenario, and this scenario only raises the stakes. So this is not a fun one to watch. It's pretty disturbing, but if that's what you're into, this is a great pick. Another anxiety-inducing one is Would You Rather. Now, this one's kind of like the dark version of Dinner for Schmucks. It's rich people that throw a dinner for their own amusement, and the guests that they invite have to play this game of Would You Rather, and the things that they have to do in order to win and presumably make a lot of money are horrifying. Think kind of like movies like Saw, except this is a much smaller film, and almost all takes place in this like banquet room, and is mostly about the decisions and the horrific things that they have to do. And keeping in mind that it's that simple in concept, it all plays out pretty well, but it is dark, it's grim, it's graphic, it's unsettling, but I enjoyed watching it. I found it to be thoroughly entertaining, but you do require a little bit of a twist in your brain in order to enjoy something like this. Again, we're with the low budget stuff that works well for what they had to work with, but we're gonna get into some bigger, better, more well-rounded horror flicks coming up. And with that, the first one on this list that feels a little bit more like a well-rounded traditional horror movie with a bunch of sets and special effects and stuff is Demonic. Now, this is still a small movie, but there's a lot more going on in it than some of the others. And this is about a team of ghost hunters that go to this house, and then weird things start to happen. And then there has to be an investigation because some horrible things happen. So you jump around in time, which works. But there are some really kind of frightening sequences that really kind of drag out, like they take a long time to play out, which I thought was great. There's some good frightening visuals, some just good old-fashioned haunted house, scare the crap out of you stuff. Again, one that you really have to just sort of turn all the lights off and let yourself get freaked out, but if you put yourself in the right mindset, Demonic definitely has some scares in it. One that's almost just as good, meaning if you've seen Demonic and you liked it, you should also check out Don't Knock Twice. And this one actually stars Katie Sackhoff from Battlestar Galactica and Lucy Boynton from several other horror movies. She's a bit of a scream queen herself. And this one, again, kind of a traditional freak you out, demonic things going on, ghosts and stuff, things that are going bump in the night. Is the protagonist losing their mind? Is it in their head? Is it not in their head? Are things really happening? You kind of go back and forth with this one, and what you get is you get some good visuals, you get some really good scares. Another one, kind of like Friend Request, I had really no expectations for this one, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. Now, the only reason Mara is where it is on this list is because it could have been so much better. There was a lot of promise with this one. This has a decent story, really pretty, some of the most terrifying visuals we've covered so far. There's some scenes of sleep paralysis, which I find particularly troubling, and it is just creepy as hell. And then it sort of like loses its way a little bit. I mean, had it been tighter and more glued together, this would have been a really high ranking one, and odds are a lot of you would have seen it already, but as it is, there's a good chance this is a hidden gem that you haven't seen. You just have to, again, have fairly low expectations, and this one's going to scare you. In fact, me just thinking about some of the really weird visuals in this one, I'm getting freaked out as I'm looking in the monitor and I'm seeing this like black shroud behind me. It's giving me the willies. Another one that, this one could have been one of the best ones on this list, but it just had some weird elements that did not work. However, it does have some elements that do work. It's called The Super. One of the elements that doesn't work is Val Kilmer's in it, and this must have been right after he had like surgery on his throat cancer, because he's clearly dubbed. Like, he must have not been able to speak, but they wanted to throw him in there anyway, and it takes you out of the movie. It was so bothersome for me, and he's playing this really bizarre character, and this is not a knock against Val Kilmer. I like Val Kilmer, but he's at his worst in this movie, unfortunately. However, a couple of the other characters redeem it. This one's about a father who moves into a building in New York with his two daughters as a handyman, a Mr. Fix-It, and weird things are happening in this building. He's having visions. He's not sure what's going on. Val Kilmer's character is about as creepy as you can get. Would have been even creepier if it was his voice and his performance and not some weird dubbing. Really polished looking, like the most polished looking one we've gotten so far. This looks like a big budget movie that could have come out in theaters. It's missing a few pieces of the puzzle. That said, true horror fans should really watch and enjoy this one. Now, if you watched my other video with the fun horror movies, you notice there was a lot at the back of the list that were Netflix originals. I haven't mentioned any yet. I'm about to, because the scary Netflix original horror movies are far better from their cheesy ones, and I think The Ritual, even though it's really only a Netflix original in the US, I know in UK and other parts of Europe this was in theaters, and it deserved to be. I think this is a great, great movie. It's got an H.P. Lovecraft sort of element to it, which I always love and appreciate in movies. This one's about a bunch of guys that sort of get sidetracked on a camping trip, and they go through this segment of the woods that they should not be in, and it's got like Nordic mythology elements to it, and there's a monster, and it's surprisingly gory, and it's just really different. Like, I was just surprised at how far this one went in the direction that it went. If you passed on this one, because you just, I don't know why you would have passed on it. This one got good buzz. But if you have, I'm almost wondering why I didn't rank this one higher. I guess because some people didn't like it. I happen to really love it, and I think it's one of the best horror movies Netflix has put out. I've got one better one further down this list, though. Another surprising one to me was As Above, So Below. Now, this one came out in theaters, just like Friend Request. I had no interest in seeing it. I thought it was just going to rehash things and just kind of be a dud of a movie, because there's so many duds when it comes to horror movies. And then watched it, and I was so surprised. Kind of like my critique of The Ritual, I was surprised at how far it went in the direction that it went. But with this, you follow a group of people exploring the catacombs underneath Paris, and they just keep going deeper and deeper. Some of the spook factor and scares start up early in the movie, and they just keep intensifying, and the movie ultimately gets really intense. Now, obviously, some of this stuff is silly, but that goes for all of them. Again, if you're a naysayer, just have fun with a movie like this, and it's a really good ride if you just sort of let it go and don't try to be such an intellectual about it. Now, there I go bashing being intellectual with your horror movies, and we jump to the most intellectual one, I think, on this list, and that's The Cell. Now, this is one, if you never watched it because you thought it was just a Jennifer Lopez movie, you're dead wrong. Yes, it has Jennifer Lopez in it. Yes, it has Vince Vaughn in it. I think it's some of the worst casting. Now, don't get me wrong, they both do a good job in this movie, but it completely misled audiences when this movie came out. This is a dark, dark dissension into hell, into the mind of a psychotic serial killer. So think Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs, but instead of Clarice going to Hannibal Lecter to try to get inside his mind, they have technology that allows a psychologist to actually go inside the mind of a patient, and they do that with this serial killer. They've already captured him, and they have to do it in order to find his final victim who may still be alive, and what happens inside his mind is pure nightmare fuel. This was done by an amazing director who has just one of the most incredible visual styles working today. It's just such a beautiful movie to look at, and it's dark, beautiful visuals as well. It's stuff that I cannot show you on YouTube without definitely getting demonetized, but it's not just nonsense. It's, man, this movie works, and it's while it's not like necessarily going to terrify you for days after like a true horror movie, it's still, if you really wrap your head around this one, it is just one of the most horrifying things on this list. Now, before we get to the other 10 on this list, I gotta tell you about CyberGhost VPN. They are a fantastic sponsor for this show because they allow you to watch Netflix in other countries. There are different movies in the UK, in Germany, in France. My US viewers, you can watch those. My international viewers, you can watch all of these movies that I'm talking about, and you can sign up for as little as $2.75 a month, depending on which plan you pick. And just as an example, Netflix UK has a ton of movies that are not available on Netflix US, including A Simple Favor, Fast and Furious 8, Tomb Raider, American Made, Rick and Morty, Baby Driver, Blade Runner 2049, The Foreigner with Jackie Chan, Suicide Squad, Mile 22 with Mark Wahlberg, The Equalizer with Denzel Washington, Den of Thieves, which I really liked, Sicario 2, and they give you a 45-day money-back guarantee, so if you sign up for it and just find you're not even taking advantage of it, cancel the thing. They offer 24/7 customer support. I have been using this service for a while now, and I've never needed any assistance because it's so intuitive and it always works. But if you need help, they are there to help you. And you can use it simultaneously on up to 7 devices. Use it on Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, Fire Stick, Linux, and more. That's enough for me, but to boot, it's a VPN. It keeps your browsing secure. It blocks malicious websites. It's a good thing to have. A lot of people are signing on to them now, and especially like you EU viewers, if YouTube content is blocked, this will help you get around that as well. But let's move on with the rest of the list. All right, now we're in the top 10. So my number 10 pick is one that surprised everybody last year when it came to the US, and that's Veronica. Now this one is foreign language, but this is one of the better demonic possession movies to have come out in recent years. We get 1 or 2 of them every single year. This is certainly one of the best this decade. Again, with the really frightening visuals. If you don't watch movies with subtitles, this one doesn't have too much. As I recall, you could really sit through this one because a lot of the time you're dealing with this teenage girl who is getting pursued by these nightmarish visions, and there's just a lot of screaming in a lot of this movie, but visually it all works. If you do follow the story, it is pretty terrifying, particularly if you're predisposed to being scared of demonic possession type stuff. This one's gonna get you. If I know that is a thing that people struggle with in movies. If that's you, this is a tough one. Okay, so my number 9 pick is the darkest movie I have seen in years. And when I say years, I mean like a lot of years. The Eyes of My Mother is a black and white film that is just a few years old, but oh my, this one, I don't want to say what happens because it'll ruin it. Look at some of the visuals and just listen to what I'm telling you. This one made me feel so awful after. Like, I didn't know what to do with myself when this one was over. Now, I let myself get really into this one, maybe a little bit too much. I did not like the way I felt afterwards, but I could not stop watching this movie. It's visually stunning. It's so well put together. Now, I'm in danger of overselling it because you also need to be a fan of art films. This is a slow, sort of beautifully cinematic art piece. If you don't like movies like that, if you think that's just BS, you're probably not going to dig this movie, even if you like really dark movies. And if you like art films and you don't like really dark subject matter, you're not going to like this one either. So this is one that's really... it's perfect for a select group of you, but if it sounds like it's you, do not miss this one before it leaves Netflix. So my number 8 pick is another Netflix original. This one is from Canada. It is French language, so you're gonna have to read subtitles with this one, but it's one of the better zombie movies I've seen in a while. It doesn't feel like the same type of thing. It's basically the same scenario. You're following a small group of people trying to survive the zombie apocalypse. They're out in the country, so the zombies are really kind of spread out. Again, visually, this one feels very different. It feels like something new, which is why I have it ranked so high. In addition to the fact that it's just really well produced. It's all put together really well, and it's just a good, solid movie. If you didn't bother or didn't even know about it, because it is one of those foreign language Netflix originals, another great Halloween pick for this year. All right, number 7, Home Stretch. These are some of the best you can get on Netflix right now. Some of them are, movies that were really popular when they came out. Some of them are not. The Autopsy of Jane Doe, though, is one that didn't really get noticed when it hit theaters. It's only just now starting to pick up a following, but I really, really liked this one. It is fairly slow-paced, but it manages to be interesting because it's about a father and son that run this mortuary, and so you see all the process of them like having to bring in a body and process it. But what ultimately starts to unravel is that this Jane Doe that they are given has some very odd elements with her autopsy. And as they begin to uncover those odd elements, very odd things start to happen in this dark, quiet mortuary. It is creepy, creepy stuff, and it's fairly original as well, which is why I have it ranked so high. Oh, and plus, with Emile Hirsch and Brian Cox, it's one of the best acted horror movies on this list as well. All right, number 6 and number 5 go hand in hand, so I'm gonna kind of talk about them together, but that's The Conjuring and Insidious, in that order. I happen to think Insidious is the better of the two. That said, The Conjuring is the better produced of the two. It's more polished, it's more well-rounded, it has a better feel to it, and it really is sort of top shelf horror in terms of the production. It's really, really well made. I felt it relied a little bit too heavily on jump scares and false scares. Two things that are kind of cheap gimmicks in horror movies. Horror movies are full of them, but The Conjuring was just loaded with them. But ultimately, when the real scares do start to happen, I thought they were good, and I thought the movie looked great, and the concept and everything was really great. I just didn't find it to be nearly as clever as Insidious. And the reason Insidious, I think, is clever is, one, I find the red-faced demon to be way more terrifying than anything in any of the Conjuring movies. That's just me. I find him horrifying. I find the Tiptoe Through the Tulips song horrifying, and in addition to that, I really kind of like the ghost hunter guys that came in. Lee Winnell played one of them. He's famous for having written the Saw movies and wrote and directed last year's Upgrade, which was one of my favorite movies of last year. But their sort of Ghostbuster kind of stuff with their gear and stuff, I just found the whole thing to be a little more clever and fresh, and a lot happens in the movie as well. It just kind of keeps changing, and I was ultimately surprised where it ended up. So this one I just think is one of the better horror movies to have come out this century. Now, my number 4 pick isn't as good as some of the ones that I just picked, but I personally like it for several reasons, and it is horrifying, and that is Terrifier. I guess I should have said it was terrifying, but this one stars Art the Clown, one of the scariest clowns to have been in a movie in recent memory. It also stars Jenna Cannell, who's a friend of the show. She's been on the show multiple times. There's links to some of her videos in the description, as well as Gino Caffarelli, who's been on the show, and Catherine Corcoran, who's been on the show. So Terrifier's got a special place in the Flick Connection community. It also was in a video that kind of really sprung up the channel around this time last year. So I have an affinity for it, but in addition to that, it is a horror fan's dream. It subverts expectations and does crazy things. This is like a B-level horror movie that just does a really great job at being a B-level horror movie. And how do I know that? Because all of the negative comments about it revolve around it being a B-level horror movie and people not getting that that's what it is. So if you don't like B-level horror movies, you're probably not going to like Terrifier. If you do like them, Terrifier is an absolute gem, and they are making a sequel that should be out maybe this time next year. My number 3 pick is The Blackcoat's Daughter. Now, while I personally found Insidious to be scarier than The Blackcoat's Daughter, The Blackcoat's Daughter gets this spot because it is surprising. I did not expect this one to be as frightening as it is. It's got some subtle, yet very scary imagery in it. It's a scary concept. It's way grimmer than I expected it to be. I'm kind of spoiling it by telling you that, but I want you to watch it. This one was a surprise to me. It feels fairly familiar, somewhat formulaic, but just barely. Like it's not formulaic in a bad way, which is surprising, but this one is just dark. It's about a couple of girls who get left behind at a boarding school, and just really sinister stuff starts to happen. It's slow paced, but it is worth the wait. My number 2 pick is the oldest movie on this list, and that's Carrie. Now, this is based on a Stephen King book. It's directed by Brian De Palma. It's certainly one of the best movies on this list, which is why it's at number 2. Another one that takes a long time to get where it's going. To me, the thing that's scary about Carrie is the concept. In today's world of a superhero movie in the theater every single week, this is what might actually happen if someone had supernatural powers. The ability to move things with their mind. If that person was then teased and bullied, this is the nightmare that could unfold. It's based on the writings of a really great horror writer. It's a really great director. It's a great cast. It's just a real killer of a horror movie. If it's been a long time since you've seen it, you would be hard-pressed doing better for a Halloween watch this year on Netflix right now. And then my number 1 pick is bound to piss some people off, but I happen to think The Witch is one of the best horror movies to have come out this century. Now, I can appreciate why some people wouldn't like it. It is slow-paced. It's not what you would expect. It does not follow the formula. If anything, it breaks the formula, which is why I think it's really so special. And in addition to all of that, and me just sort of praising the filmmaker, it's very well accomplished in the realm of just being creepy as hell for 90 minutes. It doesn't stop being creepy. It's a total creep show. And this director has a new film coming out this October called The Lighthouse that looks like it's going to be even creepier. I'm excited to see that one. It's a great time to rewatch The Witch if you have seen it. Another one, if you don't like quote-unquote art house films, I can see why you wouldn't like The Witch, but I'm just telling you as someone who watches far too many movies. I'll just admit it now, way too many movies. The Witch is top shelf stuff. That is it. That is 50 when you include the previous video. I hope you found some good recommendations on this list. If you did, take one brief moment, thank the Patreon supporters in the comments below. Here are their names, everyone donating $5 and up. You can donate less if you'd like. You can follow the link in the description to see if you'd like to support the show to help me produce more content like this in the future. But I will keep making videos like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking this one out, and you will see me on the next one.